Hi, this is Nick from PrimeLoops.com. Today I want to talk about creatively chopping up orchestral loops and putting them over beats. Along the way, we'll learn the basics of using the Fruity Slicer, we'll get familiarized with chopping up orchestral loops, and we'll also utilize the piano roll for rearranging our slices. So let's get to it. The first thing I want to do is load up a suitable orchestral loop for this project. I'm going to start out at 86 BPM, and then I'm going to convert this channel into a Fruity Slicer. So I'll right click, go to replace, and then choose Fruity Slicer. If I click on its interface, you'll see that it's pretty simple. I'll just click on this load sample button. I'll head over to the Orchestra and Classical String Loops into 86 BPM loops and load up Happy Sad 86. Now the Fruity Slicer has by default cut the sample up into a few too many slices, so it's going to sound a little bit too jittery when it plays back. As you can hear, there are artifacts being introduced into the sound because too many slices have been created. What I'm going to do is fine-tune these auto-slicing parameters so that they make the sound a little more natural. So I'm just going to bring them both all the way down until there are no slices in the sample. Now these two knobs down here represent the sensitivity of the auto-slicer. The low knob is responsible for coarse slicing changes, and the high knob is responsible for more fine-tuned slicing. So first I'll adjust low, and as you can see, as I increase the parameter, it's creating slices at major boundaries in the waveform. I think it's good right about there. However, a lot of these slices over here are still not being picked up, so I'll come over here to the higher sensitivity slice setting, and that will take care of the rest for me. And that looks pretty good right there. So now that I have my slices properly set up, I can right-click in this window right here next to the Fruity Slicer channel, and it will bring up the piano roll. And this predictably is where you get to rearrange all the slices that you've just made with the Fruity Slicer. As you can see, when I scroll over here, we have all the melodic information arranged in a stair-step pattern. And as it stands, since we haven't modified the order of the slices playback, they play back exactly as the original sample did. The only modification I'm going to make to this particular pattern is simply to erase the last half of it, because I don't want it present for the track that I'm putting together. You can erase slices simply by having this pencil tool selected, right up here, and then holding down the right mouse button and dragging over them. I'll close this out, and as you can see, the length of our pattern has been cut down. Now I'll come up here to the pattern selector and drag up, and that will give us pattern 2. I'm going to use the same sample material for pattern 2, except this time I'm going to rearrange the slices a bit. As you can see, there's no piano roll information yet for this pattern, because we're on pattern 2. All I have to do is right-click here and go to piano roll. I'll scroll up to the note region where we have the slices located. If you click on them, you get a nice little preview. So I'm just going to draw in a simple pattern for now. I'll start with a little stagger right here. And then I'll bring in the next slice right here. And then I'll just keep drawing in my pattern until I'm done. And then I'll just draw in this last note, pop it in right here, and there we go. So then that will be pattern 2. I'll close this, and we'll move on to pattern 3. Pattern 3 is where I'm going to let the drums come in, and I'm also going to work with a different sample than the one I have loaded up right now. So I'm going to actually load up a different sample here. So I'll right-click here, go to Insert, and then Fruity Slicer. For this new Fruity Slicer, I'm going to load up another version of the orchestra loop that we can use to chop up and lay over the next section, which has the beats going under it. So again, I'll load up a sample just by clicking on the sample button here and going to load sample, and I'll load up Happy Sad PL4. First I'll let you hear it without any of the slicing. So now that we have the sample played out, I've got a few ideas on how I'd like to rearrange it over a beat. So we're going to take the same approach that we did with chopping the last sample. We're going to start out with the low sensitivity slicing knob to do most of the slicing for us. And then if we need it, we'll use the high sensitivity chopper just to add a few more slices where we want them. So I'll just start dialing this up. And this is actually looking pretty close to what I need for chops right now, so let me just play that back. That sounds pretty good. So let's get to rearranging this on the piano roll. Again, I'm just going to right click on this section here to bring up the piano roll, and I'm going to erase most of this information. And now we'll start dropping in pattern 3. Now I'm going to set up a slightly different sounding set of chops here to differentiate this pattern from the first. So let's try this out. So that's working pretty well. I'll close this out, and then we'll load up a drum loop to go underneath of it. So I'll come over here to my browser, and we'll look through the Dirty South Drum Loops pack. Alright, I think this one will work out pretty well underneath that loop. Now I know this drum loop is 86 BPM, so if I just drop in a trigger right here at the beginning of the pattern, it should play perfectly underneath of this chopped pattern up here with the orchestra loop. Okay, now that we've got pattern 3 done, let's create one more. And again, we'll do a little variant on this orchestral part to keep things fresh. And additionally, we'll add a variant of this drum loop. So let's move up to pattern 4. The first thing I'm going to do is drag in another version of the drum loop we used before. As you can hear, it's got the hi-hat part in it. And additionally, I'll make a new pattern for this top orchestral part. So again, I'll just lay in my pattern like I did before. Now I'll just make sure to put in a drum trigger here, and let's hear how it sounds. That seems to be working nicely, so let's move on to the next step. I'll close out the piano roll here, and now we'll string together our patterns into the beginning of a song. The way you do that is to open up the playlist editor up here, and then simply draw in your pattern triggers down here. So we'll start with pattern 1, and then we'll do pattern 3 for a couple of triggers. We'll break up the drums with pattern 2, and then move on to pattern 4 for a couple of triggers. Now the last thing I need to do is just switch over to song mode here, and let's hear how it sounds. Go. In this way you can see that it's actually pretty easy to get the beginnings of a song put together without fussing around too much with overly technical things that aren't going to do a whole lot for your creativity. So let me just recap what we've been over in this video. We started with an empty pattern. First we started with slicing up an orchestral arrangement by creating a fruity slicer just by right-clicking on one of these channels, going to Insert and then Fruity Slicer. Once I did that, I brought up the Fruity Slicer interface. I used the low and high sensitivity knobs to automatically create slices for us at certain regions, and then once I was happy with where the slices were, I simply clicked the Dump Beat to Piano Roll button, and it set up the beat in a stair-step fashion right here in the piano roll. Once we had that accomplished, I was able to create a variety of different patterns with different slice combinations to make up the different parts of the song. As you can see, we went through the creation of 4 different patterns here, and then we were able to arrange those patterns up here in the playlist editor, simply by triggering them one after the other in whatever order was required. I'll see you next time for more music production tips and tricks. Stay creative.